Welcome to the Unraid January Digest. I'm your host, Stefano Partita, and we will discuss everything that's happened in January of 2025. Let's get started. I'm not sure how anyone would miss it because it's been posted all over social media on every website that you could possibly imagine, but Unraid 7 stable is here, which is great news because it adds some features that everyone's been waiting for, as well as some other maybe unknown additions that you haven't been tracking so far, such as some Docker features like the Tailscale integration, which allows you to seamlessly integrate Tailscale into Docker containers for more secure remote access, fork bomb prevention, which allows you to set PID limits to prevent resource exhaustion, and overlay 2 support, which allows for optimizing Docker storage on ZFS volumes. There's also been networking upgrades like the Tailscale plugin, which uses Tailscale certificates to secure web UI access and easily share Docker containers. There's been IPv6 enhancements, which were added for dynamic support for changing IPv4 and IPv6 addresses, and NFS improvements for full support for NFS 4.1 and 4.2 protocols, and new settings added for better performance. Speaking of NFS, Mac users can now rejoice because compatibility issues with Time Machine and Samba shares has now been fixed, so you can now use that without any worry. Furthermore, there have been improvements to the handling of predefined shares, and for anyone that doesn't know what a predefined share is, think of app data and system shares that are pre-created for you. So there's been enhancements for Docker and VMs, so that way if a predefined share does not exist, that will now be created for you, and there's a lot more technical stuff to it than that, but we're not going to get into the technicality for this video. Other improvements include those such as dashboard updates, where you can now view VM usage stats, server time, enhanced Docker RAM usage visualization, and much more. There's also a new favorites page, which allows you to quickly access frequently used tools and settings. And finally, there's also power modes, which allow you to optimize for performance, balanced operation, or power efficiency. For anyone running older versions of Unraid 6.12, be sure to update to Unraid 6.12.15 so you can take advantage of some of the bug fixes and improvements made to that version, with one of the major bug fixes being a memory leak that was affecting the dashboard page, as well as the VM Manager and Docker Manager pages. There are other bug fixes and improvements, such as the restoration of the JavaScript console logging functionality that was available in the web UI, and several others that you can see listed here. If bug fixes and other improvements aren't enough to motivate you to update to Unraid 7 or 6.12.15, then you should definitely consider updating for some of the security fixes and patches that have been made. There have been 4 vulnerabilities that have been identified and fixed in Unraid 7 and 6.12.15. The first vulnerability identified was for cross-site scripting, which allowed potential attackers to inject JavaScript via URL parameters into the Unraid web interface. And a stopgap that you can do if you are unable to upgrade to Unraid 7 or Unraid 6.12.15 is to install the Unraid Patch Plugin. But remember, the Unraid plugin is only a stopgap and not a long-term mitigation or solution to this vulnerability. Another vulnerability found was cross-site request forgery, which allows remote attackers to initiate authenticated GET requests to the Unraid web interface through top-level navigation via the Unraid authentication cookies, lacks same-site policy. The third vulnerability identified was stored cross-site scripting, which is a low-risk vulnerability that allowed attackers with authenticated access to inject JavaScript payloads, which could persist in various web interface fields. The fourth vulnerability identified was that of the community applications repository, where GitHub repositories used by the community applications app feed could be transferred to another owner, opening the possibility of hijacking the application templates. If you're perhaps interested in knowing more about these vulnerabilities, you can of course check out the coordinated vulnerability disclosure blog post for yourself to get the full ins and outs of the vulnerabilities that were discovered and recently patched or fixed in the latest releases. Whoa, Unraid Patch Plugin, that's not in my notes. We've never talked about this before. What do you mean? Okay, so apparently the Unraid Patch Plugin will allow Unraid to push some security fixes as well as other minor updates to existing Unraid operating systems. So that could be pretty useful for those of you that are on older versions of Unraid, who haven't updated to the latest and greatest versions quite yet. Finer details of the patch plugin can also be found on the forum if you are at all curious to know more information about it. Earlier this year, we had announced that Unraid had hired a new e-commerce developer, and now we know who this person is, and their name is
Craig Knoll.
For 2025, Unraid would like to start producing more content for the Uncast show. And part of that new content is a segment that is called the Monthly App Spotlight, where plugins or applications will be featured in video format, where you can get some new ideas or also information about said application or plugin. The first video is available today, and it's the ZFS Master plugin, and Space Invader 1 has created that video. So if you're interested in checking that out, be sure to go to the Uncast show and watch that video. And speaking of things to come in 2025, from an existing partnership, there may be a hardware refresh coming that you'll be interested in, so definitely keep your eyes peeled for any announcements on the Unraid website or on the Uncast show itself. Finally, from community content around the web, you'll find some very sweet videos that I would highly suggest checking out some or all of on the Unraid January Digest webpage. You can find links for those YouTube videos there, and I definitely recommend checking all of those out. And as always, thank you for watching. Be sure to like and get subscribed, and I will see you on the next Unraid Digest.